Welcome to The Kindness Project, the podcast designed to share stories of kindness and share how kindness can make positive change in our world, one small act at a time. In this episode, we talk musicals, jazz, kindness news, and why we're starting the Kindness Project podcast. Hi, and welcome to the first ever Kindness Project podcast. We said that together. Woo! That wasn't planned. High five. So that was Charlotte, who could mostly be described as young, scrappy, and hungry.
And that was Chris James, the man who loves jazz so much you might as well call him the jazz man.
So we differ in our relationship to jazz, because I love jazz. I think jazz is awesome.
I don't mind jazz, except if it's experimental.
Yeah, experimental jazz is a bit weird. I once went to a jazz club where the guy was playing the piano and then just every 10 or so minutes just wandered off. What? Got himself a beer and come back when he wanted to.
So he wasn't playing sober then?
Well, you couldn't tell, to be honest, because it was so experimental. He might have been playing sober or drunk. It sounded the same. But it was a good night out, to be honest. It was a good night out. So why did I just call you young, scrappy and hungry?
Well, it's to do with a musical we both like. Don't know if you like it as much as I do, mate, but...
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah. We both quite like Hamilton, and we're both quite excited. We're going to see it soon, aren't we?
January, we got tickets. Woo.
January, we got tickets. So, yeah, it should be good, and we'll make sure we let you know what it's like on the podcast when we go and see it. So just a brief explanation of what we're going to be doing. The Kindness Project is designed to help me write a book. I'm writing a book at the minute and I need some help. I've asked Charlotte to help me with the podcast, and the idea is we just share some happy, cheerful, good news stories about what's going on in the world, interview people who are doing great things and helping people, and trying to share some of the things that we're doing to just make the world a better place, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we don't only want to do that. We also want to have a little bit of fun and just share some ideas. So the first thing that we want to do is every podcast, we're going to have a question of the podcast. Now, Charlotte, you don't know what this is yet, do you?
I'm oblivious.
You're oblivious to the question of the podcast. So this will be a bit of a hard one for you.
Oh, God.
Are you ready?
Go on then.
And we want our listeners to get involved as well. So please tweet us. We're at Hola Kindness. My Spanish accent's not great. HOLA Kindness on Twitter.
Hola.
Or you can email us at hola at the kindnessproject.co.uk, and please feel free to visit the website and make comments and do whatever you need to on that. If you really enjoy the podcast as well, feel free to leave us a review. 5 stars is typical, to be honest, so feel free to leave us a review.
And keep listening.
And keep listening, yeah, because we've got some great stuff coming up, right, Charlotte?
Hope so.
So do I. I'm not convinced, but I hope so too. So would you like the question of the podcast?
Oh, go on then.
Go on then, right, here we go. If you could be any character from any of your favourite books, who would you choose?
She's
thinking, listeners, she's thinking.
Probably Annabeth Chase from the Percy Jackson books.
Is it Annabeth or?
Annabeth, yeah.
Okay, why Annabeth Chase from the Percy Jackson book?
Because she's kind and she's also really smart, and she uses her wisdom, whereas everyone else in the group has a weapon or a power. She only has her brain. Okay. And she always manages to be one of the people who helps the most, even though she has no physical strength. Okay. Like, she can sew and crochet, but that doesn't...
How does that work in a modern feminist world? How do you feel about that as a young woman?
I mean, mostly it's because her mother's Athena. Oh, right, okay. Crochet. Because I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the one about the girl, and she gets turned into the first spider because she has a weaving match with Athena. And she challenges Athena because she is so confident in what she does. She's actually very egotistical about it. Gotcha. And she thinks she's better than everyone. She thinks she's better than a god, Athena. So Athena comes down as an old woman. Right. And she kind of goes, oh, you should...
Sorry, listeners, you can't see this, but Charlotte just did an impression of an old woman that, frankly, was baffling. Good fun, but baffling.
Yeah, she comes down as an old woman and she goes, you should not challenge Athena because you'll incur the wrath.
Do the voice again? What was the voice? You should not challenge Athena.
Yeah, like that. Yeah. And then when the girl goes, no, I am better, the old lady turns into Athena and goes, we're going going to have a weaving match.
Oh, weaving match. You've got to have a weaving match.
So the girl, she depicts the gods as drunken fools and idiots, and Athena depicts them in glory and might. And as a
what's the truth? Somewhere in the middle, do you reckon?
Probably.
Yeah.
But as a punishment, Athena turns the girl into the first ever spider.
Okay.
I think her name was Hena.
Okay.
Something along the lines of that, which is arcane. Arachnophobia.
Yeah,
so that's basically the origin story of spiders from Greek mythology.
See, you know what's interesting? One of my favourite books is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. Mm-hmm. And I read it a few years ago, and they recently made it into an Amazon Prime show.
Ah, yeah, you were watching.
Now, I love it. Absolutely love it. And I reckon that if I could be any book character, it would be Odin from American Gods. Ooh. So it's weird how both
Odin, Norse gods.
Yeah, it was Norse. It was a bit of a trickster in the show American Gods. He's trying to compete against modern gods like culture and television and the internet and technology. And it's a really interesting play. And Gaiman's an awesome writer. He's done some writing for Doctor Who, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So, listeners, weirdly, both of our characters from books, weird pick,
godly related.
Are related to gods.
Despite the fact that we're both atheists.
Yeah, that is strange. But so what I'd like to do is find out from you who you'd choose as your favourite character from a book. If you could live the life as a character from a book, who would you choose?
Live the life? I don't know if I want to beat up monsters every time.
Well, yeah, maybe not live the life, but if you could be like one of the characters from a book, who would you choose?
Yeah.
So that's enough introductory waffle for this and first podcast, but I'm excited to get on with the show.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about kindness. Are you?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's get on with the show. So now we're at the point in the podcast where we talk and share about a couple of really kind news stories that have warmed our hearts this week. Now we're calling this segment the first ever segment of Kindness News. Now, Charlotte, do you think we need a jingle for Kindness News?
Something a little bit like Kindness News.
That's perfect. So what's the first Kindness News story you'd like to share with us?
Okay, so there's this girl, her name was Becca Schofield, she was 17, and she visited a clinic with her parents.
Whereabouts?
I am not 100% sure. And she went around to the people who were donating blood and people who had just finished donating blood. Many of the blood donors have cited that they were part of the Becca Told Me To campaign, and that was their reason for giving blood.
So it was on Twitter, #Becca Told Me To, right?
Yeah, it started out, she went around and asked people just to perform random acts of kindness and post it on social media under the hashtag Becca Told Me To.
Okay.
But she also encouraged people to donate blood.
So Becca, how are you spelling Becca? Is it B-E-C-C-A?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
There's a quote on the news page I found it on.
Okay.
What I really wanted to do is ask people to donate bone marrow, but I know that bone marrow is a lot harder to donate.
Yeah, because when you donate bone marrow, you need an operation, don't you? I'm not sure,
So blood was the next best option, and it is still just as fantastic.
You know what? I donate blood, and I actually think for something, not only do you get free biscuits when you go along and donate blood, but it's such a simple thing you can do that has a massive impact to people you might never meet. You probably never meet, the people who use your blood. But literally, you go along, 15 minutes in the chair, they ask you a few questions about your health and travel routines because they need to make sure that the blood's safe. And then at the end, you get an orange juice before you start and a water before you start. And at the end, you get tea and biscuits. Now, that means that you're performing an act of kindness and you're immediately getting rewarded for that act of kindness in the form of biscuits, which is always a good thing. So how successful was the campaign? I'm
not sure, but the clinic presented the girl with flowers, gifts, hugs for her help to encourage people to donate blood.
Awesome.
To have asked people to become blood donors is really something that is so important, and we are so grateful for her. That was said by Jacqueline Elaine with the Canadian Blood Services.
Okay, so this was in Canada, right?
Yes.
So give us that hashtag again, because we'll put it on the show notes.
Yeah.
And we'll ask people to take a look at it.
Hashtag Becca Told Me To.
Hashtag Becca Told Me To. And what we'll also do you know her Twitter handle or not?
No, it's not on here.
But we'll make sure that's on the show notes too, just so if you want to reach out and tell her how great an idea it is, you can. Mm-hmm. So I've got a news story. Let me take you back to Christmas Eve last year, 2017. And a guy called Brendan Cox. Now, you may have heard the name before because Brendan was a husband of a Labour MP who got killed in June 2016. A lunatic, a guy who had different political beliefs to Jo, actually killed her because of her beliefs and what he believed. She was only a young MP. It was a really big tragedy at the time, and certainly it focused people on the good work she'd done, even though she'd not been an MP for that long, but also the importance of some of the work she was doing. Yep. So Brendan Cox, again, this is on Twitter. So on Twitter he wrote, "Weird thing to do on Christmas Eve, but I'd encourage everyone to take a moment to imagine losing the person you love the most in the world. Imagine what you wish you would have said to them and take a moment to say it." In response, hundreds of people told stories of losing or having lost loved ones on Twitter. Tommy Lusk wrote, "My wife had been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer, so after reading your post, I told you how much I loved her." And what's interesting for me about that story is how a tragic moment in an individual's life, in a man's life, can actually turn into a moment of tenderness and kindness. And I wonder whether he'd said that as much before. Twitter user @LewisEach admitted, "I lost my 31-year-old husband very suddenly in March this year, and there is so much I wish I could still say to him. The message that Brendan Cox gave about just going out and saying stuff to the ones you love sooner rather than later was fundamentally important."
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of things you don't say to the people you care about.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we all, to a certain extent, assume we've got loads of time.
Yeah.
And it's only when something tragic like that happens that we realise that we should do stuff sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And Brendan Cox, after all these huge amount of posts telling him what they'd done to reach out to people they loved sooner rather than later, he posted, "Wasn't at all expecting this outpouring of kindness to me or each other." He described it as a lovely reminder at the end of the year that bad stuff happens, but the world is still full of good people. And I think that's a really important message to share. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really important message because when we look on the news, we see all the negative stuff that happens and all of the bad stuff that's going on all around the world. And people kind of forget to take time to look at the goods in the world.
And again, especially on social media, because if you look on social media, a lot of what you see is negative. So I think that's a great news story that Brendan Cox has gone out and done that to make sure that people recognise that most people are generally pretty awesome. So that is the first ever kindness news done. Let's move on to the main part of the show.
So, since we are recording the first episode of the Kindness Project...
How do you think it's going so far?
Not bad.
It's going all right.
It's going all right. So, why are we doing this Kindness Project?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Okay. One of the things that drives me as an individual is making my kids proud. It's probably the thing that drives me the most as a person, so making you, Charlotte, and Sophie really, really proud. And that means a bunch of different stuff when I look at my life. But one of the things that it definitely means is being a role model and being a generally better and kinder person. I actually think having children and being married to your mum, Cassie, gives me motivation to be better. I think Paolo Nutini put it best. He's got an awesome song on one of his albums called Better Man, and he just talks about the fact that the women in his life make him want to be better. And certainly that's the truth in my life, because the girls in Team Dames, you, Sophie and Mummy, all want to make me be a better person. And better for me doesn't mean just wealthier or just more successful in a financial perspective. It means being kinder, being more considerate, being more loving, being more generous, always continuing to improve. So I think for me, the reason we're starting this is because I want to try and be generally speaking, a lot more kind as a person.
Right, so I know you're writing a book on kindness. So what made you want to start writing the book? Because obviously the book is what inspired this project.
Yep, so the book inspired the podcast.
But what inspired the book?
What inspired the book? Again, it was just one of those things where I was looking at my life and saying, what do I need to get better at? And actually, the area that I wanted to focus on was just generally being a kind of person. Now, the reality of that is writing, for me, is a big motivator. So if I've got, and you like writing as well, Charlotte, don't you? But if I'm writing about something, I'm then more intentional about performing acts that I can write about in my real life. And I don't know about you, but writing always allows me the time and the space to be quite reflective.
I think I use writing more as a ventilation.
Yeah.
It's like I'm always...
So it's an expression, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm always like really happy about most stuff. Unless I haven't written for like a week, and then I feel like flopping on a sofa.
But you know what? I agree. I think writing, and it depends whether you're into it or not, and you need to be into it or not, but writing is incredibly cathartic. So just sitting down, expressing your ideas, just writing 500,000, 1,500 words, just trying to explain what's in your head, even if nobody reads it, just doing that is an incredibly therapeutic thing to do.
Explaining what's in your head isn't always the easiest thing to do.
True.
So you write a lot more factual stuff.
Yep.
I write
fiction.
Entirely, all my work is fiction.
Yeah.
Except like my school essays.
Yeah.
But it's all kind of people that kind of represent certain parts of me as characters.
Yeah.
And
it's a manifestation of your inner self,
sort
isn't
of
it?
Like all of my dark energy goes into my writing.
It certainly does. I've read a few of your stories,
and
it certainly
all of my dark
does.
energy goes into my writing, and then I can just be my happily jolly self.
But the challenge that I've got at the minute, especially with the Kindness Project, I'm sort of 15,000 to 18,000 words through the book, and I'm stuck. So part of the reason why we're starting this podcast is not only to share some awesome stories of goodness and kindness and share some ideas about how we could all be kinder people, as well as share the ideas of people who really know about kindness and really have studied kindness. But it's also to help me get rid of my writer's block, if I'm being honest. If I can start this podcast and finish off the book as part of the project, I'd be over the moon on that. So yeah.
Okay, so why is kindness important to you?
So I think, and we'll talk about this in a later podcast, kindness is important to me for a number of reasons. Firstly, I think actually kindness is a really selfish thing to do. And the reason I say that, I'll give you an example. We did some work sponsoring kids at your school through financial education.
Yep.
So we came to an arrangement at school where we were sponsoring kids to have financial education. And when I had that agreement, it cost me some money to sponsor the kids. It will cost me some time to go in and talk to the kids and help them understand a bit more about money.
Yep.
But it made me feel better. So I think kindness is an incredibly good thing to do, but it's also selfish.
Because it makes us feel better. But I think that's what inspires people to commit more acts of kindness.
I suppose there's two sides to that coin, right? Because I think kindness is selfish because it makes you feel better. The science, and we'll explore this in a future podcast, says kindness triggers chemicals in your brain that make you feel better. But then I suppose the question that I ask in my head, why is everybody not more kind?
I don't know. I suppose some people kind of just haven't tried it yet.
Well, they haven't given it a go.
Yeah.
Is that what you think?
Yeah.
Well, you could be right. And maybe if we encourage a couple of people to just give kindness a try, we're sort of doing our job. Yeah.
Give kindness a try.
Give kindness a try.
Give kindness a try.
Hashtag give kindness a go.
Okay.
Hashtag have you tried kindness yet?
Would you like to order some kindness?
With your burger and chips, would you like some kindness?
Okay, so how do the kind acts of others affect your life?
You know what? I wouldn't be where I am today without just people being generally awesome. And I look at how many opportunities that I've had throughout my life. I think there's a certain argument that says you've got to take those opportunities when they come along. But certainly some of the employment opportunities, some of the work opportunities I've had, people have given me chances when, frankly, I probably at the time didn't deserve them. Throughout school, I've always been encouraged. I think we live in a country where society is generally kind. So really difficult to put my finger on one specific act of kindness. But there's hundreds of small acts of kindness that happen each and every day that you just sort of ignore because it's just standard, right? I mean, what do you think was the kindest thing someone's done for you?
So I usually tell people, don't get me anything for my birthday, don't get me anything.
Why do you do that?
I don't think people should kind of waste their money on me, I suppose. But then I come in on my birthday this year and I come home with 2 bags of presents and cards.
Awesome. And
I kind of felt kind of flattered.
Oh, flattered? Yeah. So because you weren't expecting anything?
I wasn't expecting it because I told people not to get me anything.
Gotcha. But how did that make you feel?
It made me feel really good, actually, yeah.
Cool. And what's the kindest thing you reckon you've done for somebody else?
I do not know.
Okay. It's really interesting how we're able to see the acts of kindness that people do for us, but when it comes to the acts that we do for other people, actually we have this mental block around it. Yeah. So that's the reason we're doing it.
Okay, so what is the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you then?
This is a tough question because I think for me it's not the big extravagant acts of kindness that matter, it's the tiny little acts of kindness that people do throughout the years to just make your life generally better. So I'm really struggling putting my finger on one specific act of kindness. There's definitely thousands of my 40 odd years of life that have contributed to helping me in some way.
That was my last question.
That was your last question. So hopefully that explains a little bit about why we're running the Kindness Project podcast. We're going to be talking in future weeks about the science of kindness, why kindness impacts your brain in a positive way. We're going to be going to Scandinavia to explore what the Scandinavians see as kind because they've got a really interesting insight into kindness. We're going to be talking about some of the acts of kindness we're trying to do, Charlotte and I are trying to do to make the world a better place. And we're in the process of getting some really interesting people who have really good insight into what kindness means to come on the podcast and share their experiences.
Doesn't mean you can't share.
Yeah, certainly. We think you should share as well. So feel free to send in your kindness stories, send in your random acts or intentional acts of kindness, because we talked about this earlier, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I think actually what I struggle with is random acts of kindness because I'm a bit of a planner and I need to plan my acts of kindness intentionally to make sure they happen. So let us know what your random or intentional acts of kindness are, and please let's make this a community of kindness where we can share some of the awesome stuff we're doing. Community of kindness, do you like that?
Yeah, there's a ring to it.
Cool, I like that. And thanks for your questions, Charlotte. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Bob.
So that's it for the first ever Kindness Project podcast.
What, we're done already?
We are done already. It's been good fun, right?
Yeah.
So don't sound too enthusiastic about it. And typically what we'll do at the end of every podcast is share some of your stories about how kindness has impacted your life or how you've been kind to other people. But as it's the first ever one, we ain't got any stories to share yet, have we?
Oh, that's sad.
I know, it is quite sad. However, let me just reiterate how you can get in touch with us so you can give us your stories of kindness and we can share them on Tinterweb. So, how do you get in touch with us again, Charlotte?
Twitter!
We're on Twitter, Holla, Hola, kindness. You can also email us at Holla, Hola,
at
thekindnessproject.co.uk, and you can visit www.thekindnessproject.co.uk. We've got a Facebook group that you can get access to through the website. Please feel free to get in touch. We'd really appreciate you doing that, and we look forward to
you listening to us again.
Thank you saved me there. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.